and welcome to my first ever ranking video. And if you can't tell by the background on me, yes, we're going to be ranking the Child's Play franchise. Now, just to let you guys know, I didn't grow up with these films, and growing up, I actually avoided horror. But a couple years ago, I decided to take a look at this franchise. Took me roughly about a year, and I'm bringing this franchise ranking to you pretty much about 6 months after I finished the all 8 films. So, just bear that in mind when I place these movies, because it may be a little bit different to people who actually grew up with these films. But anyway, we have 8 films to rank in this franchise, and so let's just get into it. Coming into dead last place is Seed of Chucky. Now, here's the interesting thing. Whenever I go through a movie franchise for the first time, there seems to be that one movie that people always say, oh, you just wait till you get to this film. It is the absolute worst. And more often than not, you watch it and like, yeah, it was bad, but it's not as bad as people are saying it is. It's a little bit overhyped with how bad it is. Not the case with this movie. This movie is just garbage, and I'm not kidding when I say when I finished watching this movie, I wanted to finish watching the franchise altogether. I didn't want to continue on. I was like, you know what, fuck it. I don't care that I have 3 more movies to go. I just want to stop. So yeah, we find out in this movie that Chucky and Tiffany are resurrected through Hollywood prop dolls. Their son Glenn, who constantly pisses his pants for no reason, and it wasn't funny the first time, and then they constantly bring the joke back. And I want to know how the creator of this franchise, Don Mancini, not only wrote but directed this film. What the fuck happened here? I will say that even though this movie sucks balls and this movie is just complete garbage, Chucky is still Chucky in this movie. I will give it credit to that. But apart from that, everything in this movie, from the writing to the kills to the just what else do I have to say about this movie? And it's crap. It's shit. And it's the worst in this franchise. Moving on. Coming in number 7 is going to be Cult of Chucky. Yet again, one of the controversial films of the franchise. There's a lot of people out there that do hate this film. And I will say, the excitement that was in me going into this film, I was just immensely disappointed about this movie, especially after the surprise that was Curse. I was just so disappointed about this film. There are just so many problems with this film, and the fact of Chucky not looking too good here. Fiona Dorothy's Nika is a significant downgrade, especially when you compare her to performance in Curse. And it is Jennifer Tilly's reintroduction to this film is beyond confusing, and the fact of how terrible she was in Seed just begs the question of why they didn't just write her character out altogether. And it just leans way too much into comedy in some elements when it should be focusing more on horror. For example, the fact that Chucky can now transfer into multiple doll bodies isn't fleshed out well. But with that said, there are things in this movie that I do like. I like the whole look of the mental hospital here. I like some of the kills. I like the fact that we get to reunite with Andy and find out what he's been up to for the past couple of years. Past couple of decades, sorry. I like a lot of the other characters like Multiple Malcolm and Dr. Foley. But the one thing in this movie that I just have to point out, because almost nobody gives this movie credit for it, Chucky fucking wins in this movie. Yeah. Chucky fucking wins. Don Mancini finally pulled the trigger that he should have pulled off years ago. Yeah, Chucky beats everyone at the end. He is a human form by the end of the movie. Oh, thank God! So yeah, this movie has problems. And it's probably a film that I most likely wouldn't go back and watch again. But I will say, compared to Seed, this one is a little better, even though it is a bad film. Film number 6 is going to be Child's Play 3. Now, I honestly feel almost the same towards this one than I do Cult, in the fact that it's a very flawed movie, but has things in it that I do like. The complete setup with this movie is beyond ridiculous. They reopen up the factory after the climax of the second movie, a factory that was used in a crime investigation, and Chucky's blood is still mutilating after all these years and gets into a vat that I'm guessing only creates one doll, because hell, there's not a Chucky clone army in this movie. And then he tracks down Andy to complete the spell because, yeah, it didn't work the last time he tried to possess his soul into him. I'm sure it's going to work here. But after tracking down Andy at a military academy, he meets another kid named Tyler and goes, fuck it, I'm going to possess him instead. Sure. But yeah, after he does this, he reveals himself to Andy anyway. You know, when he could have just stayed hidden, possessed Tyler, and had Tyler kill Andy when he was taking a shit. Yeah, the setup in this movie is just so fucking confusing. And I can see on a writing point that this film really doesn't work. But for a 90s slasher sequel, it is a ton of fun. I like the fact that we age up Andy in this movie, so we're not having to do with a child protagonist again. I like some of the other characters like Whitehurst and Shelton. I like the whole look at the military academy in this movie. I actually like some of the kills, a couple of them being some of my favorite in the franchise. And yeah, I have to admit, Chucky definitely has some of his best one-liners in this movie. Don't fuck with the Chuck. So yeah, the movie itself is pretty dumb and the writing is a mess, but for a 90s slasher, I'm sure you can just turn your brain off and you'll just have fun with it. Film number 5 is going to be the Child's Play remake. And I know, yeah, a lot of people hated this film, but I didn't. What I appreciate about this remake is it took it in a very different approach. It didn't do what a lot of remakes do in just doing the same shit again. It updates it for modern times. It does clever thinking of, well, how are we going to make the kid want the doll? And what we do here is we scrap the voodoo stuff altogether and make the doll an AI that can control all the kid's electronics. And this works because it actually makes both Chuckies stand out as their own identities. Now, do I prefer Brad Dourif's Chucky more? Of course I do. I've had more movies with him. Mark Hamill's Chucky is very different in the fact that, well, you have to remember that he's not a human. He never was a human. He's an AI. So when he does all these bad things and gets scolded by Andy for it, you do feel sympathy towards Chucky. So yeah, I really feel it's not fair to compare Brad Dourif's Chucky to Mark Hamill's Chucky here, because they're completely different in their own ways. the bond between Chucky and Anne in this movie is really good. I absolutely adored Aubrey Plaza as Annie's mum in this movie. And also, I like a majority of the kills in this film. So, with that said, does it make it a perfect movie? No, I still do have issues with it. My biggest problem with this film is the fact that the design of Chucky in this movie just looks absolutely garbage, which is a huge problem when you're watching a Child's Play film because you don't want Chucky to be the distracting thing. And yeah, Andy's friends really serve no purpose other than just to have jealousy towards Chucky. And in the end, they don't get killed by Chucky. So I just think you could have just rooting them out of the film and it wouldn't have really made a huge difference. And this is one of those remakes that I actually would like to see a follow up to because I do think that if you fix the design of the doll, you could fix majority of the problems I have with this film. But you know, we've got the TV series now, and that may be it. What we get, no matter how many seasons of this TV series we are going to get, I think that after this, it might be this to end of Chucky, which would be a big shame, to be quite honest with you. Film number 4 is going to be Curse of Chucky. Now, from here on out, are actually films that I adore. So, ranking my top 4 here were really quite difficult. Where I just really have minor flaws with them, start to kind of made it a bit hard. But after the disaster that was Seed, I was pleasantly surprised about how much I actually really enjoyed this film. I like the fact that Dom Mancini made this feel similar to the original in the fact that it goes back to the roots of horror and the fact that Chucky, again, is more of the shadows. And okay, I will say that this doesn't have Chucky's best one liners. It doesn't have the best kills. Hell, it doesn't even have the best group of victims. But I would argue to say that all those things are still really good. Fiona Dorff as Nika in this movie was fucking awesome. And I like the fact that, well, it kind of tricks you into what timeline we're going with here. And halfway through the film, with Chucky explaining why he's been tracking down this family for years, it's because him as Charles Lee Ray was actually in love with Nika's mum, and he kidnapped her on the night he was murdered. But before he left, he stabbed her, and that explains why Nika's paraplegic and all that. Because, well, the mum was pregnant at the time. And just if I was to rate these with how scary they get, this one comparing to the original is the scariest. Like, I remember having nightmares the night after watching this film. That's how much this movie affected me. If I have one little issue with this movie is the fact that, well, yeah, the babysitter character is kind of really just a pointless character, to be honest, and the ending kind of feels a little bit forced. You know, even though yeah, it is the lead up to the plot for the next movie, but I don't know. You kind of maybe could have gone with a different ending. Who knows? So yeah, it is a great movie, and honestly, after Seed, I'm glad Dom Mancini went back to the roots and gave us a really good film. It's a shame that after that he made Cold, but anyway. Film number 3 is going to be Bride of Chucky. Yet again, one of the most controversial in this franchise. There are people that absolutely despise this on the fact that it blended the horror and the comedy together, which I can kind of in a way understand, but I just never understand why people hate this film anyway. I love the introduction of Chucky being able to reunite with his old girlfriend Tiffany here, and them having to find this Alcrat thing. I can't remember what exactly it was called. Because you know the voodoo is fucked Chucky over for 3 films, and he's not going to do it again. Two minor flaws in this. Chucky's death sucks, and the group of characters here really aren't too memorable. But aside from that, it still has some really awesome kills. And I was absolutely surprised on the fact that John Ritter could play such an asshole in this film. His performance as Chief Warren Kincaid is up there as one of my favorite characters in the franchise, and his death scene is up there as one of my favorite in the franchise. The fact that he gets kind of has a two-part death scene is, yeah. So yeah, as I said, I can kind of get why people don't like the fact that it blends the horror and the comedy together. But I think give this movie another chance, and you honestly could be pleasantly surprised by this. So, you know, I do like the fact that, you know, it does something different rather than trying to repeat itself again. Because I think if we repeated the end story a fourth time, it really just wouldn't have worked. So yeah, if you don't like this movie simply because it does something different, it doesn't have Andy in it, then well, you're missing out. Coming into number two is going to be the original Child's Play. Now, going through this franchise, I honestly never thought that one of the sequels could beat the original film. And I was pleasantly surprised because, well, obviously, we now know what number one's going to be. But this took back to the originals of a woman, mother named Karen, has a son named Andy who's been wanting this good guy doll, and he finally gets one for his birthday. But it, of course, has happened to be possessed by a serial killer named Charles Lee Ray. Now, the beginning of this movie with the tracking down of Charles Lee Ray is absolutely beautifully shot. And even though, yes, get we see Charles Lee Ray use voodoo on one of these dolls, and we clearly know that Andy gets the same doll. The beginning of the film still does a great job of making you think it could be Andy. Like, the doll could have now been this devil that was telling Andy what to do. Of course, it doesn't turn out to be the case, but really think about it. No one knew who Chucky was because this was the original film. Catherine Hicks as Karen is great in this movie. Alex Vincent as Andy is really good. Brad Dourif as Chucky is just fucking awesome. And Chris Sarandon as Detective Mike. Man, he does such a great job in this, and there's really no point in comparing him to the guy who did it in the remake because, yeah, I really no point doing that. There are about three scenes in this film that really messed with me. The first one is when Karen discovers that the batteries were never put in the doll, and Chucky does that 180-degree turn and goes, "Hi, I'm Chucky, wanna play?" The second is when Chucky goes to visit his voodoo master, John, and gets a voodoo doll and starts playing with it and breaking it. And also features a line that I'm sure wouldn't fly in any movie today. "Sorry, Doc, I gotta run. I have a date with a 6-year-old boy." Yeah, some reason I'm sure that wouldn't really make it into any movie today. And the final scene is the last 10 minutes when Chucky is burnt to a crisp and he walks around with his knife. Look at this image. Look at this image. And tell me that's not shit your pants terrifying. How is that not terrifying? But of course, coming in at number one is Child Play 2. Now, this was the movie that a lot of people do put as number one, and after watching it, I can honestly see why, because it took everything that was great about that original film and just turned it up to 100. The kills, Chucky's one-liners, Brad Dourif's performance as Chucky, Alex Vincent's performance as Andy in this movie. It just takes it up 110%. So yeah, pretty much now Andy is placed in a foster home after his mum is sent to a mental institution. But yeah, anyway. And of course, then Chucky comes back and tracks on Andy again and tries to complete the spell, which of course doesn't work. And then the final scene with Chucky versus Andy and Carl in the toy factory is one of my favorite final acts I've seen in the movie. And Carl is up there as one of my favorite characters in the franchise, or the fact that, you know, the foster parents really couldn't give two shits about either of them, and Carl was just that sympathetic foster sister, especially towards near the end of the movie when she discovers that Chucky is real. Like, I really have almost nothing to say about the sequel other than it just took everything that was great about the original and just turned it up to 100. And going through this franchise, as I said, I never thought that any of the sequels could top the original film, because it's very rare going through a franchise. It's very rare that a sequel can top the original film, but here it manages to do it. So, guys, thanks for watching this ranking. Movies would be good, movies may be bad, but I review them anyways. Peace.